I would say the problem with being proud of your race is that you're taking credit for something that you didn't achieve. So, like, the U.S. Declaration of Independence was literally formed by a handful of white European men, and it's like you have large groups of people, literally millions of people now on the far right, who are like attempting to like co-opt like these achievements. And then somebody had mentioned earlier that group identity politics game is the same game that's being played on the far left, and that's true. And I think someone else said that progressivism is not born out of a relativist worldview, and I would say that is most certainly true that it is. Progressivism is literally derived from a postmodernist worldview, which is defined as an attitude of skepticism or skepticism of meta-narratives. And that's important because people who are progressive tend to be anti-Israel. And it's because they see the world, they reject meta-narratives, and they see the world as oppressed versus oppressor, and they view Israel.
But that's a narrative.
Right. They reject meta-narratives in place of another, and they replace it with a narrative of,
again, that's what I'm
you
saying.
only hold this narrative because it's best for you. And so we're offering this other narrative. The world becomes just warring identity groups.
But that itself is a narrative. Like, postmodernists reject meta-narratives. That progressive narrative is a narrative in itself.
No, they say you make your own narrative, whatever you want
It's
it
a
to be.
skepticism of meta-narratives, right? That's right. So you reject one narrative and you replace it for another. But they don't believe in objective truth.
Progressivism is older than postmodernism. They do have a certain view of what...
They don't have the same form.
I don't think it's coincidental that progressives are for...
They're the biggest moralists in the
They view
world.
everything as a social construct to progressives. They don't believe in biological sex. They believe in sex assigned at birth. They believe that men can be women. Not you're a trans woman. No, you literally are a woman. This is a relativist worldview. It's a political ideology born out of a relativist worldview. And that's the reason why progressives on the left are very anti-Israel, because they view Israel just as they view the United States, as a fundamentally white supremacist state. They view Israel as a white supremacist state. As foolish and simple as it sounds, that's how they view it. And that Israel is a big oppressor, oppressing brown people around Israel. That's how they view it.
And do they think that's good or bad?
Do they think what's good or bad?
The oppression of the poor people.
They think it's bad.
If they say yes or no, either way, they're not relative.
That's why I say that progressivism is relativism masquerading as compassion. I understand that they will submit a moral reason for what they're doing,
yes,
but that's not really what it is. It's relativism.
Final points. So now we have Andre. Andre, please.
When we talk about race and culture, so a specific group created culture, that's entirely incorrect. No culture exists without the previous existing. Culture is a process, not a monolithic thing, right? So you say, oh, the European culture is created by white people. Bullshit. The European culture goes back to the Greek culture goes back to the Egypt culture, and or European culture goes Roman, Greek, Egypt. The Egypts definitely are not white. So no, that's simply factual, not true. If we talk about culture as an identity for a race or a specific group, like that's simply factually wrong. And when we do that, we separate instead of going to say, okay, what is the culture which we are supporting, and how do we do that? We start to separate by, which ethnicity they are. Okay, so the Arab. In the Arab countries, not the Arabs, but in the Arab countries and the Arab cultural room, that was a fork in the process of progress. Progress by itself is good. It's not bad, in my opinion. And when you come there are forks in this process of cultural development. Now, Islam ended in a point where they don't want to further develop. And they have successfully do so that they're still basically in the mentality of the Bronze Age. While the Western culture has progressed, they have overcome the Inquisition, right? They have learned, hopefully, from what happened in the Second World War. And if we allow that to go back to race or to separate us and not see progress as something positive, that's where we will fail.
Okay. And so we have Khalid.
I have two reasons. I want to say two things. The founding of America was always an idea. It was never a race or religion or creed. That was the point of the American identity. And most Americans are liberal nationalists. They're not ethno-nationalists. They're liberal nationalists. They're mostly ideas of liberal freedom. You come to America, you become a liberal. You most likely enjoy the liberal rights that the state gives you. The transgender movement is not about just about the issue of sex and not sex. It's the idea that are we ready to transition to a new phase of human evolution? That's the idea of transgender movement, because the transgenders are preparing us for the next evolutionary stage of human development. That's the whole point of that. Are we ready to modify our bodies with different technologies? That's what I'm going to say.
Okay, thanks, Khaled. Hila?
Hey. Okay. I want to talk about Nick, that I think he hates women, maybe from trauma, but I think he hates women and is using language that he borrows from other subjects, so he can use the people that are shallow enough to just listen to these words and then take these people to him as his back. And I think we should address it, because I think there is once we go to the edges of many groups, it's like, it's no more anything they are identifiers, but they take it to anarchy. And then they are anarchists. And Nick is on this bird of, is an anarchist right now. He's not, because you come from an ideology that has depth and logic, you have a creation of something that is positive to the society. And if you're not, and you're just breaking society, you are a total anarchist and you are bad for society. And it can come from many shapes and forms and direction of this map. And also I think the extreme transgender movement, and they occupied women's spaces, they take space in women's sports, they are doing horrible stuff to women. I think they are also men that hate women and has trauma. I think if you look at them, they are even not trying to pass as women, because they laugh at women, they hate women, they're doing it out of women hate. And it is my take.
Thank you, Hila. Shauna? Shauna? Are you with us?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me now? Sorry.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that one of the things I wanted to talk about is for like American quote unquote whites. One of the issues is that for a lot of us, we're so ethnically mixed that identifying with an ethnic identity doesn't really work. My heritage predates 100% predates World War I, and 99% of it predates the American Civil War. I don't really know everything that's kind of in me, technically. I know some of my ancestral lines go back to like 1620. It's a mixture of British and German and French and Swedish and a bunch of stuff. The other aspect to that too is it's really important to understand that these countries are also going through processes in Europe of reclaiming their own identities. And I see it on both the left and the right in, for example, Scotland and Ireland. And there's a lot of that own stuff. They don't actually want us. This has been my experience when I've tried to connect with the things I do know, is they'll basically be like, no, you're American. And they will assert we are not Irish, or you are not really XYZ, you're an American. And so for a lot of American white people, quote unquote, there's not really a good answer for us. We're kind of just getting pushed aside all over. And I think that's where some of the frustration is coming from. I also want to say a lot of this, and this is going to sound very religious, and I don't necessarily mean it in a religious way. A lot of this has to do with the breakdown of the family, because historically we would get our identities passed down from our parents, but if our parents are split up or there's a lot of chaos in that, we're not getting organic identities handed down to us. So Jewish families, I would say a lot of Catholic families, Mormons, and some Protestant families, they seem to be doing a little bit better because they're getting organic identities handed down to them. So that's my thoughts.
And now it's Oscar.
I think to go back to what Khalid said about America, I think that in America, culture is kind of besides the point. It really doesn't matter what culture you come from or what's your origin, as long as you follow the laws of the nation. It matters really little how you decide to dress. Obviously you gotta dress professional if you're gonna go to government offices, but like it matters really little what you believe or what your culture is. How do you decide to celebrate Thanksgiving, whether it's turkey or something else? Like, it really matters. And I think what happens in America is that it really mattered the order of immigrants that came here and the way that American identity began to get consolidated. And then how that identity, Anglo-Saxon white consolidated itself, even still after the annexation of many of the states that used to formerly belong to Mexico and Puerto Rico as well, which is a commonwealth, Spanish-speaking commonwealth of United States, which doesn't really blend very well with the other parts, of the, if you want to see the US as a white nation. So I think the US shows that culture and religion and these kinds of things are beside the point, as long as you follow the laws. This is a republic. What we need is civics, right? Civic people that follow the law, that respects the law, and that also respects that how the law applies to them and to others and their relationships with them. So yeah, I think USA shows that culture is really besides the point.
Okay. Thank you. So now we have Joseph.
Oscar hit part of it. It's the United States wasn't founded on one single culture. I mean, you've got the Pennsylvania Dutch, you've got the Pennsylvania German, we've got French and Spanish here in the where I live here in Louisiana. The United States was founded on one simple idea, and that is rule of law over all else. Doesn't matter if I'm a Catholic, somebody's a Protestant, somebody is a Jew. We all follow the same law. Now, I'm going to freely admit and put this right out there because I do understand it. That's the idea. It doesn't always happen in practice. I know this, but the idea is there, and for most of the part, I would say at least a good 90% of the time, it's how it operates. And because we have one law for all, I mean, I have beliefs and laws that I follow as a Catholic. We have, if you're a Catholic, we have canon law. That only applies to those of us who are Catholic, and we understand that. It's something we voluntarily take on. Culture wise, I cook across the board from Mexican, Spanish, pretty much every Pacific Island nation because that was the food I grew up with. But I get accused of cultural appropriation. If I was to start a Japanese Italian fusion, I would get crucified by the American left for cultural appropriation because I'm not Japanese. I can't understand their culture. Never mind that my first wife was Japanese. I've been to Japan several times. I understand the culture from maybe not as somebody who grew up there, but I was immersed in it enough to understand. Yeah, I know what the taboos are in Japan and in Japanese culture. As an international businessman, I had to learn other cultures. But I know that here in the United States, I don't have a separate set of laws that apply to me that don't apply to somebody else, which is something you would see in the Muslim nations. There's one
Final
law
point,
for
Joseph.
Muslims. I'm sorry?
Final point.
Well, okay. The point is that we have one law for everybody. Whereas if you take a Muslim nation, you have one law for Muslims, one law for the Dhimma.
Yeah, that's why Sharia could be potentially dangerous, and that's why Christian nationalism is also potentially dangerous for the same reasons.